Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday, January 30th. And we are so excited to be flying with Paul Osterhout today. We will get started right at the top of the hour. For those of you just joining, welcome to the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. We'll get started right at the top of the hour with Paul Osterhout. Welcome to the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to get started with Paul right at 12 o'clock. For those of you just joining us, thank you for being with us on this Friday, January 30th. And we are going to get started with Paul in 30 seconds. Welcome to Zeitgeist Experiences, formerly known as Zeitgeist Design and Production. I'm Becky Kiefer, Studio Director. Here inside the Zeitgeist Creative Studio, imagination rules and time is always of the essence. This is where immersion artists Ryan Harmon, Joe Cicero, and the world's top experienced designers study the past and spin the present, envisioning the future of location-based entertainment, or what we call UXIRL, user experiences in real life. The Spirit of the Time Zoomcast offers a sneak peek behind the themes. Each month, we move you without a ride system, inviting one incredibly talented and influential colleague aboard our time machine. We set the controls for milestone moments in that person's career and attempt to unravel the mystery of what makes a guest experience timely yet timeless. And because we're live, you can type questions into the chat box, and our passenger will answer them after the 60 to 90-minute journey. Climbing aboard our time machine today is a man who achieved executive level creative leadership status at both Walt Disney Imagineering and Universal Creative on two different coasts within the same decade. Paul Osterhout. If you've ever experienced any of the attractions at early Epcot, many of the original attractions at Disney's Hollywood Studios, New Tomorrowland at the Magic Kingdom, Walt Disney Studios Park in Paris, or Universal Studios Beijing, then you've no doubt stumbled upon the work of this master storyteller, producer, and production designer. It's now my pleasure to introduce our time machine pilots, Zeitgeist President and Chief Creative Officer Ryan Harmon, and retired Disney Imagineer and animator Joanne Cicero, along with the one of the most successful introverts in an industry of extroverts, Paul Osterhout.
We are back, guys. Where are we, Joe? Oh my God. My ears are still ringing from that concert.
Man. Okay, we just returned on this day in 1969 on Savile Road in London. There was a small little band some of you may have heard of by the name of the Beatles. And we were there listening to them.
So
now,
cool.
This guy was trying to break through the crowd to make his way up.
I said I knew Paul. What a weird view, though. They're like up there, and we're trying to watch them. And
it was
amazing.
Hear them,
but
amazing.
Yeah, it was still cool. Final Beatles performance.
Yeah, and that's what's so great about the machine. It takes us everywhere. And today we're going to have a great time with Paul Osterhout, who I must say, after watching that slideshow, you made some daring fashion choices.
You did
through your career. Very daring.
Yep, those pants, the mullet. Okay, I had the mullet. Okay, so you had the mullet. Okay, let's set the controls. I think we're going to go to 1963. And Paul, we're in a magic shop. I don't know if exactly, are we in Boston? Where are we exactly? I don't know. Tell us where we are back. I know we're in a magic shop and you're buying that little ball thing. Tell us what's going on. Yes, that one.
It was in fact Boston. It is actually, this is my origin story starts here because I was the oldest of 8 children. My dad was a Marine Corps, and he was stationed in Vietnam. So my mom, this is early 60s, so it wasn't a total of 8 yet. It was like 3 or 4. And we lived in Boston because it was close to my grandma. And obviously my dad wasn't around. And then one day, my mom, I don't know why, I was the only one. We were in Boston, and she decided to take me into a magic shop. And I fell in love with magic. Not so much performing, but just the idea that smoke and mirrors can make an audience think something different. And just the engineering of magic tricks and how they're made. And that was like, I was 7 years old, and that stuck with me. And like a lot of especially young boys, they're interested in magic for a while and they grow out of it. Well, I didn't grow out of it. It kind of stuck with me. Even though I do perform sometimes. I mean, I'll do an illusion or a trick to knock home a point if I'm doing a speech or a lecture or something. I'll do something like, I did a talk about the future of theme parks and attractions. And I said, do you think I can really predict the future? And then I would go and predict the future card trick thing. So, just to illustrate that kind of, and just to make it fun and exciting. So, but I'm still involved with magic. I still, I attend regular meetings and I keep up with it, but I don't perform that much.
Well, we got a birthday party coming up soon. Maybe we can hire you to
both of our birthdays are next week.
Perfect. I'm there. I'm there.
Clown makeup for this.
Yes.
They're scary. We don't want that.
Yeah. No, I'm there.
So 1972. Yeah, 72, you moved to Orlando. Was that also because of your dad?
Yeah, my dad retired from the military.
Okay.
It's actually closer to 70.
Okay.
And so he moved to Central Florida. There was a big Navy reserve, a Navy base here. So there was, the hospital and the commissary and all those things that retirees look forward to.
Oh.
And So we lived here, and we moved to a little area north of Orlando called it was called North Orlando at the time, and it was really like a one horse town. There wasn't much to do. So the guys I hung out with in high school, they all joined the volunteer fire department. So it was like, okay, I joined the volunteer fire department. Well, at some point around 72, 73, North Orlando incorporated into a city, and it became the city of Winter Springs. And when they incorporated, I guess the state gave them some money to, start a police force, start a fire department. And those of us that were in the volunteer fire department, we were asked, do we want to become real, licensed, not real, we were real, to become licensed firefighters. And we were like, yeah. So during the day, we would go to high school, and at night, we were doing night classes at the college to become firefighters. So I did that. I became a licensed firefighter, did a EMT, and I thought my goal would eventually become a paramedic. Wow. I was part of the American Red Cross Disaster Action Team. I did that whole thing, and then what happened? then this collision of magic, and I had graduated high school by this time, and I was like any high school student. I worked in fast food. One of the places. By the way, it should be a law that every kid that graduates high school has to work in fast food. It should be a law. It will learn so much about people, about humanity.
and motivate you to get an education, because you don't want to be that 60-year-old guy who was at the fryer going,
That's right. That's right. So I worked for a franchising company, and one of the places that they franchised was in a roadside attraction called the Mystery Funhouse. Ooh. Now, the Mystery Funhouse was in Orlando. It was right across the street from where they eventually built Universal Studios. Uh-huh. And the building is still there. It's not operating anymore, but the building is still there. So I worked in the restaurant there, and there was a magic shop like right across the dining room area. And so I used to hang out at the magic shop a lot. And one time they were adding these new attractions, these new like a chamber of horrors. And the project manager happened to come in, and we were just talking. He said, I'm looking for sculptors. Somebody people can sculpt, because we need sculptors here to help make this thing. And because I was in magic and I was building my own stuff, and so I knew how to use hand tools and I knew how to sculpt a little bit. So I said, I can do that. So he said, great. We need you to work from like 11 o'clock at night to 6 in the morning because the place is open. And I said, great, I can do that. And I can still have my day job. This project manager's name was a guy that a lot of you know. His name was Bruce Gordon. Wow. Bruce Gordon was the project manager. Now, those of you that don't know, Bruce Gordon eventually went on to work at Imagineering and he did Splash Mountain. He did the new Tomorrowland for Disneyland, and he did a lot of things. He worked a lot with Tony Baxter.
And the Walt Disney Family Museum, too.
And the Walt Disney Family Museum after he left Imagineering. That's right. So I met Bruce Gordon. We became good friends. I did the job at Mystery Funhouse. And then that job was over, and they said, we have another job in Daytona Beach. It's on the pier, right at the base of the pier. And if you want to come join us, we can pay your salary, we can pay for your accommodations, and we'll pay for your food. And I was like 18 years old, and I'm going like,
that's like a good deal.
What? So I said, yes, I'll do that. And I kind of left the firefighting and the emergency medical technician and all that behind, because I think my true passion was art and design.
Yeah.
So we went to Daytona Beach, did that. He said, great, they love you, everybody loves you, but we're based in Southern California. If you want to come out to Southern California, there's a job for you. I said, well, there wasn't really anything keeping me here in Orlando. So I said, great, let's go. So we drove across the country, and we got a job. I got a job. He was already working for this company called Entertainment Environments. And they were based in a place called in Buena Park, California, which is in Orange County, California, close to Knott's Berry Farm, like a stone's throw from Knott's Berry Farm. And it was the Cars of the Stars, Planes of Fame Museum. And so that's where we kind of worked. And behind the museum, there was some studios that they sublet out to artists. And one of those artists was somebody named Von Dutch, who was a famous pinstriper in the 50s and built cars and was friends with like Steve McQueen and all these cool people. And Dutch, we just called him Dutch. Dutch is one of these cool artists that was very bohemian, And Dutch had built a lot of the props that went into that Mystery Funhouse project. So I got to meet Dutch and work with him a little bit. And Big Daddy Ed Roth was a good friend of Dutch's, so they would all come over and they would drink beers and talk.
One of my childhood heroes, big.
Yeah, Rat Fink and all that. Yeah. So they would just talk and bullshit, all that stuff. And eventually what happened was the museum started to run into hard times. So one of the last jobs we did was they bought the Bonnie and Clyde death car. And so Bruce and I rented a truck and drove to Jean, Nevada, which is like halfway to Las Vegas, and then took it up to Carson City. And then Bruce and I built the Bonnie and Clyde Death Car Museum, and we ran that for like from up till Labor Day or something. And then it was obvious that they were going out of business. And our boss said, "Well, there's this company called WED Enterprises, and they are building something called Epcot." Now, being in the industry, even then, we knew what WED Enterprises was, but had no idea what an Epcot was.
Yeah.
So we both pretty much called on the same day and said, "Hey, we'd like to interview for positions," and they pretty much said, "Come in right away." It was almost like, "You're late already. Come in right away." This was like October, November, and then we interviewed and we went in and. Matt Pretty and Maggie Elliott and Michael Morris interviewed us, and I guess we passed because they offered us a job. We both started on the exact same day, 8th of January, 1980. Started at Imagineering. We were the first two hires into the property department, and at that time, what we call the Tahunga facility was the production facility, and the Tahunga facility was under Maggie Elliott, who ran the model shop. So if you were hired as an artist or a designer, a dimensional designer, you could either work at Tahunga or you would be borrowed back to the model shop, depending wherever the need was. So sometimes I would work at 1401, sometimes I would be at Tahunga building. But we, from 1980 to about 82, when Epcot opened, we had like maybe 600 artists working there. And I was originally hired as a dimensional designer 3, which is the entry level, and then I worked my way up to dimensional designer 1, or they changed the names at the time. They called them artisan. I was an artisan 1, and it was great. After Epcot, we worked on New Fantasyland for Disneyland. We worked on Tokyo Disneyland, a lot of stuff for Tokyo Disneyland, and then in 84, it was slow down period, so we got laid off. But let me tell you a funny story. About a month after Bruce and I started, so this would be like maybe February, March, a couple months. Someone said, "Hey, those IDs you got from Imagineering? Those are like the golden ticket. You can go anywhere in Disneyland, backstage, front stage. You can bypass lines and go do the ride and just tell them you're doing a ride check, and you can be an a-hole, And so Bruce and I lived in Orange County. We still lived down in Winter Park. Bruce lived with his parents at the time, and I had an apartment. And we said, "Let's go to Disneyland and watch the fireworks." Cool. So not only we went to Disneyland, we watched the fireworks, we went backstage and stood about this far from where the mortars were being launched, right? Boom, boom, boom. And then, wow, this is cool. As soon as the show was over, basically Disney security descended upon us and basically took us to the holding cell at Disney security, asked what we were doing, how did we get here? Because we just looked like normal guests, right? We said, no, we work for Disney. Let me see your IDs. Took our IDs and said, "You can get these back from your manager." Oh. So like we're employed for like 2 months, and we're thinking like, "Oh, we're gonna get fired." It's like we're not even we barely know where the bathrooms are. So this was like a Saturday. Nothing happens on Monday. On Tuesday, Matt Pretty calls us into the office, and he basically slides our IDs back to us and says, "Don't do that again." And that was it. but that's not the Disney story. Let me tell you the Disney story now.
Okay.
Once we're in security, there's a merchandise shop in security.
Oh, of course there is.
How Disney is that? And on the back, it's Winnie
Oh
the Pooh.
my
And I'm
God,
sorry,
no
it's faded.
way.
It's all faded, but it's Winnie the Pooh with balloons, and it says, "I escaped the Disney slammer."
Wow. I
And
never knew that.
Now that's a collector's item. Wow.
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't know if very many people have
No, do
that.
you have to pay for that? Or they give it to
yeah. I bought it, and it was like, it was just the weirdest. It's how Disney can that be, right? I mean,
Yeah, oh,
of
yeah.
course, they're going to have a
Absolutely.
merchandise
Yeah.
shop at the security office, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so
Right.
we survived that, and I tell you, Mike Morris and Matt Pretty, and Bill Vanek. Bill Vanek was my immediate boss. You couldn't
Yeah.
ask for a better leadership for
Yeah.
what we had to do, and when you look back on like 1980 to 80 October 82, what had to get done.
Yeah.
It was
You look back now and you go, like, no, that would be impossible. No one can do that.
Yeah.
But we didn't have that. No one told us it was impossible. We just did it. We just did it. And getting there and starting at Tahunga, we were waiting for stuff to come in. So I would go work with Yale Gracie.
Wow.
I would go work with Lee Thomas, Madame Leota. We were all there in that same little building.
Wow.
And Ward Kimball was the creative director for Transportation Pavilion, and he would come in and he'd sit with us and he'd look at what we were working on, and he'd do little doodles and sketches. And it's such a magical time in my career.
Yeah.
I didn't know any better, right? It's like, oh, this must be normal. I don't know. Is it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in 1984 happened. As if you don't know, the Walt Disney Company was being looked at to be taken apart and sold for its pieces. There was these, green male investors who were deciding to tear it apart and make money.
Yeah.
Luckily, Roy Disney was able to convince Michael Eisner and Frank Wells to come to the company and kind of go into the renaissance of the Walt Disney Company, and really the renaissance of Walt Disney Imagineering after Epcot. And then they came in. Now, I had left in 84. From 84 to 87, I went to work for a company called Cinnabar. Now, at the time, Cinnabar was the largest non-union scenery shop, special effects shop in Hollywood. And I got hired there to be a set builder, a prop maker. But over the 3 years, I started to run their special effects department towards the end. I have to back up 1 second. Before I left Disney, after Epcot opened, we were doing New Fantasyland. We were doing stuff for Tokyo. And I met a guy named Joe Rohde. Joe and I worked right next to each other at the model shop. He was working on, I think, Spaceship Earth, and I was working on Mexico Pavilion or something. And we got to know each other and became friendly. Eventually, Joe got moved over to Tahunga because he was a skilled scene painter. He could paint scenery, and they were doing a lot of blacklight painting. I think it was for the Pinocchio attraction. And we became really good friends. And as a matter of fact, we would play softball on the weekends together. We had a social life outside of Disney. And so anyway, I'm working at Cinnabar doing maybe, I think it was around 600 commercials, television shows, game shows in 3 years. It was literally do a McDonald's commercial, break it apart, repaint it. Oh, now it's a Burger King commercial. I swear to God, it was that, or it was do Pepsi. Oh, now we're going to do Coke, but we're going to reuse some of the same elements.
Oh.
That happens a lot.
crazy.
So 87, Joe says to me casually, he said, "Would you consider coming back to Imagineering?" I said, "Yeah, of course I would." And he says, "Well, I'm pitching this idea for an animal park, and I think it's going to go." And he may have said, I sold it, and we have to staff up. My memory becomes hazy, but the idea was Joe was asking me if I would come work on Animal Kingdom. I said, yeah, of course. HR got a hold of me, or professional staffing got a hold of me, and came in and said, "Great, we want to hire you. Here's what we want to do, make you a production designer." And so I said, "Great." So I went back to work, and I get called into a meeting with Bob Weiss and Steve Miller, and basically saying, "Hey, you worked in television for the last 3 years and movies and stuff." I said, "Yeah, I did a lot of scenery building and production design and all that." And they go, "Great. We want you to come work for us on this project called the Disney MGM Studios." It's like, okay, it's a job is a job. So I never got to work in Animal Kingdom with Joe. But I did get to work with Bob Weiss and Steve Miller and Tom Fitzgerald and a lot of really great people. I was assigned audio, what we called audio video complex, and that was the Superstar TV and the Monster Sound Show, and that was the production designer. Michael Sprout was the producer. Cal Rotundo was the writer. I think Mike West wrote the Monster Sound Show, and we just had a great time. Again, it was one of those things where no one told us how to be, so we just helped each other. There was no silos. There was none of this about you're doing my job, or we just all worked together to do it, and get it done. And again, impossible schedules, but we didn't know it at the time. We just did it, right? Yeah. About 6 months before Disney MGM Studios opened, I got called into Bob's office, and Bob and Tom Fitzgerald were there, and they said, "Hey, as you know, we're adding expanded capacity, and we're doing Star Tours, and we're looking for a producer." And so I started going well, how about this guy or this guy or this guy? And both Bob and Tom looked at me like, snap out of it, Oh, me? You want to make me a producer? Oh, okay. Because, again, we were all doing the same job. So I kind of produced a little bit of Superstar, a little bit of Monster Sound Show. Yeah. And so I became producer of Star Tours for Disney MGM Studios. And now the film was a lift, so we weren't changing the film. We were doing 6 simulators. Disneyland had 4. We needed extra capacity. But the real big heavy lift here was the queue and relaying out the entrance to the building, because it was a different story. Now we were kind of telling a story about being in a studio. So we wanted to have kind of a studio overlay. Shannon Hanaway and Todd Fitzgerald did a lot of the preliminary stuff on that queue. And then I came in to kind of finish it up and do the walker, and that Steve Brooks did an incredible job designing that walker. And so we did that, and that worked out great. And Star Tours was a big hit and is exactly what the studio needed at the time. And then at this time, we had called in. We had now taken over the bowling alley. So I had moved offices to the bowling alley, and they said, "Hey, we need you to come to a meeting about a new project we want to do for more expansion for the studios." Okay, great. Go into the meeting. It's Jim Henson, Jim's staff. Joe, you were in that meeting. And it was like, we want to do a Muppet Studios, whole studios based around the Muppets, and it's going to fit into the Disney MGM Studios. Michael and Jim had been talking about Disney acquiring the Muppets, and I think Jim was tired of running a company. He really wanted to get back into experimental films and that kind of stuff. So it was like, cool, this is going to be great. And so we brainstormed some ideas, and Jim really loved that film, the new film formats. And so we went into designing a 3D film for the Muppets, which is like no brainer. This is, of course, this is what they would do. Right. And then Joe was a creative lead on the Muppet Studio, the ride, the Great Muppet Studio ride, with Marcello. And I think Tim Kirk, worked on that. And famously or infamously, we never got to do the full studio build out. Sadly, Jim died just before MuppetVision 3D was completed. Frank Oz came in and finished the film for Jim, and because of Jim's passing, the family didn't want to really sell anymore to Disney, so we didn't get to do the full movie ride. Even though we did do a scene, we built a scene out as a test to see if it would work, and it was awesome. And just being in meetings with Jim Henson and his staff was just amazing, because as I've told other people, I didn't grow up in the era where Walt Disney was my creative fun guy. I was more of the generation where it was the Muppets. It was Jim Henson. And so Jim Henson was my Walt Disney. And so to get to work with him, and such a humble person, like, Jim, you're Jim Henson. You don't need to be this humble and inviting to everybody. But he was. He was just had no ego, and was just the person you saw on film was the person in real life. And same with Frank Oz. You know, the person you saw being interviewed with Fozzie or Miss Piggy that was Jim Oz. I mean, that was Frank Oz. So did that, and then now I had 2 feet, 1 foot. Now Muppets was done, and Bob said, "Can you go help do the new Tomorrowland at the Magic Kingdom?" It's like, yeah, okay. So I became a senior producer now, and I was promoted to director level, and I took over the new Tomorrowland for the Magic Kingdom, and that included a new Carousel of Progress last scene, new Buzz Lightyear. We did Visionarium, the Circle Vision show, a complete land makeover, and then the infamous alien encounter, which we don't have enough time to talk about alien encounter.
You did the
So
scary one or the Stitch one?
No, the original. The original.
Yeah.
The original. Yeah. So that was a great project. Again, you know, Bob asked Eric Jacobson to kind of oversee what we were doing. And so it was really it's like I've been so lucky to work with some very collaborative people throughout my career. And so we did that. Buzz Lightyear was great. We had no budget. We essentially took all of the Delta Dreamflight animation, reskinned it, repainted it, took the same vehicles, but added a spin mechanism, and added the guns, and done. The Carousel of Progress, we hired Gene Shepard to be the father, which was fun because he was like a hero of ours from the Christmas Story. We got all the other voice talent there, but we couldn't find a voice for the teenage boy in the last scene. And the last scene was really where we made the big changes. We updated it, and we had some auditions for male voices and female voices because female voices sometimes do. Bart Simpson is a female voice. We just auditioned, and I was sitting in the recording studio with Kevin, and I said, "Kevin, it's got to sound like this. Hey, Grandma, come on," or whatever the line was. And Kevin said, "Why don't you just do the voice?" And it's like, well, and I said, "Yeah, okay, but we are sensitive about this." So we went to Marty and we said, "Marty, these are all the people we tried, and Kevin thinks I can do it," and Marty goes, "Do it," because we don't want to be gratuitous about inserting ourselves into show. At least I don't. So I became the voice of the teenage boy in Carousel of Progress, which is still there.
Wow.
But here's the funny story. We decided at the very end that we're putting in the original song, and at the very end, everybody's going to sing a line of this, of the song, and then they get to me, and it's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow, and I can't sing. I mean, ask anybody. And they worked with me in the audio group there. They worked with me like all afternoon. You're coming in late. You're coming in late. You're coming. Like finally, they said, "We got it. We got it." And so finally, now we're in the theater and we're doing the final mix. George Wilkins, who was our musical director, and Kevin Rafferty are sitting up at the mixing console with, I think, Kirk Kinsell, and I'm like 2 or 3 rows back, taking notes and looking at everything. And now we get to the singing part, right? And it goes, Gene Shepard does his, but by the way, we had a sound alike for Gene Shepard because he couldn't sing either. So Gene Shepard does his, and then Grandma does hers, and Mom does hers. Now it comes to me, and it goes back to the full cast again, right? And I see Kevin and George kind of like put their heads down, like they can't turn around and look at me because they know they cut me out without me knowing about it, So look, they made the right decision. Don't get me wrong, but at least you could have told me. So that was fun. George Wilkins was one of those. Just he grew up in the 50s, and he I don't think he ever graduated out of the 50s or out of the 60s. Like, "Hey man, come on man, let's go man." And then one other thing that I want to mention is Sunny Eclipse. Sunny Eclipse, we had no money for doing extra stuff. We wanted to do something at Tomorrowland Terrace because when there's no live music there. It's kind of dead. And so we had this extra piece of animation, and we got a bunch of people at Mapo and a bunch of people in the audio department and a bunch of people everywhere that said, okay, we'll bury the hours somehow, right? George wrote a bunch of great music. Kevin wrote a bunch of great lyrics, and together they wrote an entire album of Sunny Eclipse. And then our animators came in and did the animation, and it is a big hit. It became like one of the most talked about things in New Tomorrowland.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like one of those afterthoughts, right? We didn't know, and so we just did it. So again, I was working in Magic Kingdom, but we were also still developing stuff for the studio tour. And after MuppetVision became the Sunset Boulevard expansion, where they did Tower of Terror.
Right.
And then we knew we wanted to do something for teens, because we really didn't have a grasp on the teen market. And Tower of Terror proved that we can do thrilling things. We can do thrill rides. And so we had Sunset Boulevard. We had essentially the Beverly Hills Hotel, which was, kind of modeled after that. And so we were in a brainstorming session and was thinking, what else happens on Sunset Boulevard? Well, it's where the Whiskey A Go-Go is. It's where, the Troubadour, a lot of rock and roll happens on Sunset Boulevard. So why don't we do something with music? So we said, okay, we'll do something with music. We had gone and seen a roller coaster that had a linear induction, a linear synchronous motor launch. When you think about traditional roller coasters, you go up a chain drive, tick, 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 and then gravity takes you back to home. Well, this new kind of launch system doesn't do that. It uses magnets to launch you, either launch at an incline or launch straight. So we said, this is cool. Let's do a roller coaster with music. And we wanted to do something with inversions. Disney had never done in the States a roller coaster with inversions. Now Tim Delaney had done it in Disneyland Paris with the Jules Verne Space Mountain.
Right. Yeah.
We wanted to do something in the States. And so I was producing that, and we kind of made a list of, it was almost like a filter list of, okay, has to be a band that's still touring, because our story is that we're going to go follow them to a real show. So it wants to be a band that's still touring, a band that has a deep catalog of hits, because we knew we had 5 trains, and we wanted each train to be different. It has to be multi-generational. Your parents has to know them, and you have to know them, because that's the guests who come to the park. And then this weird kind of thing about, they have to have maybe been in trouble already and have redeemed themselves, because as you know, we've hired celebrity talent before, and then they do something that celebrities do, and it doesn't really match the Disney brand. And so we had to find somebody that has done that. Now, at the top of the list was Rolling Stones. And they loved the idea. We pitched it to them. They loved it. And then they said, this is what we want. And we said, yeah, we can't make this deal work.
Yeah.
Next on the list was Aerosmith. And just by coincidence, Aerosmith had just recorded, I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, the Armageddon, the music from Armageddon, which was a Disney film. And so we already had a connection. We can easily get to their management. And so one day, I got a call from, Wendy Lietman, our lawyer or somebody, and they said, okay, you're set to call Steven Tyler in like this afternoon. Okay.
Wow.
Get on phone rings. Hey, it's Steven Tyler. It's like, okay, like in what world does this exist, right? So I pitched him the idea, very on the phone. I didn't want to go too deep, because that kind of, it takes away from when you do the real pitch. And so I just said, this is what we want to do. You're telling us we have to go meet you to go to the show. And he goes, we love it. I said, great. And they were on tour. They were on the 9 Lives tour, I think, at the time. And I said, great. Can we meet you up on your tour and do a proper pitch? Yeah, sure. No problem. And so they were going into Minneapolis, Minnesota. And me, John Solomon, who worked for Theme Park Productions and really was our talent wrangler, Mike Lenz, who was our project manager, and Wendy Lietman, who was our lawyer at the studio, who was going to consummate the deal. So we get to, now we had been doing animatics. We'd done computer simulations. We knew what the ride track was, but at this point, We knew what the ride track was going to be. And so we had done simulations. We had started with Rolling Stones. We had Rolling Stone music in there. And then, so we talked to our coordinator, and said, I need a MOS tape. MOS means without any audio, just silent. And they handed me a couple tapes, and great, in case one doesn't work, great, I'm good to go. So Mike and I and now if you've been to Minneapolis, because of the winters, they have a lot of these overhead walkways between hotels and business centers and the shopping malls. So Mike and I are probably a quarter of a mile away from where Aerosmith is staying. And we all agreed we're going to meet like at 10 o'clock in the morning in one of the conference rooms of the hotel they're staying at. So Mike and I, of course, get there early. We want to set it up, set the boards up, make sure everything works. And so we're setting everything up, and I put the tape in, and it takes a while for the hotel to bring us a proper, video monitor and all that. We finally get it. By this time, Steven and Joe and Joey and the band are out in the antechamber before coming in the room. And I put the tape in and hit play, and the volume on the TV goes, "Start me up." It's the Rolling Stones as loud as can be. Mike and I look at each other and we both dive for the video player at the same time, trying to hit the stop button. It's like, oh, crap. And so I said, I got 2 tapes. Maybe the other one is without sound. And Mike goes, okay, I'll stall them. And I ran through these upper corridors from their hotel to our hotel, grabbed the other tape, ran back while they're now sitting around the table. And I put it in. I go, oh, please, 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 please. And I put it on, and it was one without the audio. I was like, oh man, like crazy. But anyway, they loved it. They loved the pitch. They loved the idea. And then that evening they said, oh, you guys got to come to the show tonight. And so we went to the show, first row, center. And their tour manager, just before the show starts, comes by, walks past us, and he goes like this, and he's handing us earplugs because he knows what's coming. And they started their show with a curtain drop and a big concussion boom, and it's like, oh my God. And then here's what's cool. I've never seen this before. So Steven's singing and Joey's doing a guitar solo, and they're both out on the thrust of the stage. And Steven turns to Joe and goes and points to his guitar. And apparently his guitar got unplugged. Now, keep this in mind. They're singing at the top of their lungs. You got 16,000 people screaming. And Steven Tyler can hear when Joe's guitar goes out. And it's like, how do you do that? I mean, it's like, I couldn't even hear my own heartbeat. And, but he can hear the music, and he knows what, and they corrected, and it's like, it was great. So anyway, working with Aerosmith for about a year.
Who else
on the show?
Paul, who was number 3 or 4 or 5?
We had a mix band of Elton John, we had a guitarist, we had a Ringo Starr, the drummer. We just had this Chinese menu of stuff. And we could have ended up with Spin Doctors or somebody like that who was popular at the time. But I think we made the right decision by going back in time to an established band, and they were, and not only that, there was a couple more parts of this filter system that I put. We had to be able to afford them,
right?
And they had to be willing to do things that we wanted to do. They had to be willing to film a pre-show. They had to be willing to let us take their music and change it, because it has to work on the coaster. Yeah. And they said yes to everything. They're just like, yeah, sure, whatever. And it turns out they're all big fans of Disney. Tom Hamilton, just by coincidence, Tom Hamilton, the bassist, was here in Orlando 2 days ago to go ride the ride because he had heard it's closing down.
Oh, funny.
And then I heard they were performing up about 20 miles away from me, and I went over there last night, and I went backstage, and Tom and I hung out. It was like, yeah. I haven't posted that picture yet, but we took a picture together, and he remembered quite a bit of it because I had pictures that he had sent me. All the band members had sent me their home studios because we wanted that studio environment that's in the pre-show to mimic what they would have actually done.
Right. And
then they lent us 2 of their road crew to help dress the set. Timmy Doyle, Jim Service were there drum tech and guitar tech, and they came in and worked with us for about a week on dressing the set.
Wow.
They brought in all the they had got all these companies to donate all the instruments and stuff, and it's like, yeah, like I said, sometimes everything works out for a reason.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that was fun, and I got to live the rock star life, for about a year, because we would fly into where they were performing, and then the second time I thought I was going to get fired. The first time was, backstage at Disneyland. Second time, we had brought in the producer who produced Green Day. He now worked for Disney and the Hollywood Records, and we were going to go out to Steven's house to work with Joe. Joe was going to record at Steven's house the new tracks and stuff. So we had about maybe like 8 or 9 of us were flying out to Boston to Steven's house to finish up the tracks. And the producer who worked for Hollywood Records said, let's just get the company jet. He says, no, I'll take care of it. We'll get the company jet. Like, okay. So we all go to, I don't know, maybe it was Van Nuys Airport. We get on the company jet, and I think Kevin Rafferty and I are the first ones there. And Kevin goes, hey, look, it's Michael Eisner's briefcase. And Michael had left it on the jet. And all this time I'm thinking, they're going to fire me. They're going to fire me. They're going to fire me. They're going to fire me, because why are we on the company jet? But, if you actually do the math, flying us all out business class, first class, it pays for itself. And it was like, nobody cared. Nobody asked questions. And it's just like, okay, well, I guess we're all good here. They came out, and during Grammy week, we recorded the video. The pre-show, Jerry Reese was the director. And Jerry Reese is coming out here. I know he was on one of your Spirit of Time podcasts. Jerry's coming out here at the end of next month, and I'm going to interview him for a lot of his Disney projects that he had done. Awesome. So Jerry, another one of the good guys.
Yeah, for sure.
So that ended. We opened that up, and it was a hit. At this time now, we're working on some other ideas at the Magic Kingdom. We had done New Tiki Room Show. We had done Aladdin. We had done Mermaid Meet and Greet. We had done Mickey's Toontown Fair. And all of these, I was the lead producer on. And we had almost touched everything. And now we're going to get a little controversial here. And this is for the people who aren't Imagineers. A lot of times you get handed a job and it's an assignment, and you don't really get to debate it. You get to ask questions, but you don't get to say, no, I don't think that's a good idea. We shouldn't do that. You can say that. It's not going to run very far, but you can say that. So they asked me to take out Mr. Toad's Wild Ride and put in Winnie the Pooh. And it's like, and the first question you ask is why? Okay, why are we doing this? Because there's always a line for Mr. Toad. Everybody loves it. And the reason was because we can't sell Mr. Toad merchandise. No one will buy it. We can sell a lot of Winnie the Pooh merchandise. And so as a business decision, okay, I get it. But as a fan of the park and as a fan of those attractions, it's like, So, you have to do what you have to do.
So wait, so side note, Paul, side note, what do you think about them removing Rivers of America for a off-roading Cars Land ride?
I'm going to get to that later.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe as my closing, remind me.
Okay.
As my closing. That'll give you a hint of where I think about that. So we did a lot of stuff in the Magic Kingdom, a ton of stuff, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of work. And at this point, we're trying to find ways to save 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Greg Bryant and I were both certified scuba divers, and we would dive into the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea lagoon to see if we could figure out ways to make the ship, the Nautilus, do things. Like, when you hit the icebergs, how come you don't feel anything on the boat? Well, we went down, there was C-clamps, and we C-clamped 2x4s to the track. The boat does float, but it is tracked. And it was great. You fly by, you go by the icebergs, and boom, you feel the boat shift. And it was like, look, we now made this exciting. And you could just tell nobody cared. Like, yeah, that's great. Okay, go back to doing what you had to do. Anyway, so we did that. And then Marty came up to my office. This was probably end of 99. Yeah, it was the end of 99. Marty came to my office and said, we're going to make a change on the creative leadership for Second Gate Paris. and we'd like you to lead that.
Mm.
And in those situations, you don't, maybe I should have asked why. I didn't ask why. I just said, okay. So I got promoted to vice president in early 2000 to take over Disney MGM Studios. Tom Morse was creative director, and we had a really good crew. We had a good team on board, but what we didn't have was budget. And now remember, Disney decade, 90s, right? We launched cruise lines and water parks and new theme parks, and it was the new hotels, new resorts. And that was truly, in looking back at it, that was the Disney decade. And I think early 2000s, I think management said, now we have to start reaping the rewards of spending all this money in the 90s. So all of a sudden, budgets got cut. And Joe, you know this as well as anybody. You did Hong Kong Disneyland, and Hong Kong Disneyland, Disney California Adventure, studio tour in Paris, Second Gate Paris. And I don't know if there was this noble lie that was being told to the people in the executive offices, but we're going to do a half-day park. Like, what does that mean, a half-day park? Like,
Right.
It's a noble lie. There's no such thing as a half-day park.
Right.
If you commit yourself to go to a park, you're going to go to a park.
Right.
So
And expect a full day.
Yeah.
and expect a full day.
Same price as all the other parks.
And the problem with we can do hours and hours about the problems with Disney's Second Gate Paris. But one of the problems was the budget kept shifting. And so they would do a master plan of what they thought they had budget for, and they would go like, oh no, well, we don't have that much money anymore. And then so now all of a sudden this master plan starts to look like somebody who's missing teeth. Right? There's a hole here, there's a hole here, there's a hole here.
Right.
And and if you could do it all over again, you would move everything in closer. But by this time, construction's happening. My first meeting in Paris with the team, one of Paul Pressler's finance guys said, like at the end of the meeting, oh, by the way, we're going to reduce your budget by 200 million French francs. Now, this was just before we turned over to using the euro,
right?
Which I got a little story about that. And so I thought the senior project manager, I thought he was going to go across the table and choke this guy out. He was angry. We were all angry, but he really was angry. Because you imagine the pressure that everybody's under to deliver a Disney quality product, and every time you have a meeting, they're taking budget away. So it's just crazy. We eventually built 9 attractions in a parking lot. That's really what it was. We couldn't afford concrete. We had asphalt. So it was 9 attractions, and 2 of those attractions were rides. A version of the Rock and Roller Coaster and an Aladdin round ride.
Oh my God, that's the only.
We had 2 walkthroughs. Disney Channel walkthrough, animation building walkthrough. We had a live show, 3 live entertainment did that, and we had an Armageddon, which was another walkthrough, a special effects show, and we had Cinemagique, which Cinemagique was like, that was a Disney attraction. That was we had a tram tour, but there was no back lot because we hadn't filmed anything there. We had a bunch of old cars that somebody got and said, "Oh, look, that's the car from 101 Dalmatians." Is it really? It's like, and it was just, Dinotopia. We went and rebuilt the Dinotopia set. Who remembers Dinotopia? And it's just like, so it was like such. People put in such hard work and working in the winter and all the mud, and was just hard work. But it was just, we just knew. And same with people that working on Disney California Adventure. They just knew they had to do an assignment, but it wasn't Disney quality. And I'm sure, Joe, you felt the same thing. It's like, this is not what we should, our first step into China, this should not what it should be, right? It's like, it needs to be, it makes a statement. And so we all got through that. So that opened in 2002. And then I stayed on in Paris and took over the Disney, the design studio, the WDI design studio, which was part of SQS and design services. And I had like 30 people working for me. And we did all the hotels in both parks and the RD, the retail dining and entertainment area. And we we were adding things, and eventually in 2005, my visa was up, and so I came back to Imagineering. And when you're gone for 5 years, you walk in the building and people go like, "Who are you again? What'd you do?"
Yeah.
And so it was like, and Jay Rosullo, I think, was looking to cut overhead. So
Oh.
me, the Kirk brothers, a bunch of people got laid off. If you had the vice president in front of your name, you had a target on your back.
Wow.
And so I got laid off in 2005. So that ended my career at Disney, 23 years, which was great. I loved it. And and people say, would you go back? I say, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't I go back? And so now I'm looking for a job. And one of the guys I had mentored at Disney was a big mucky muck at Electronic Arts. And he called me up and said, what do you think about doing video games? And I said, I really don't know about video games. I mean, I was a casual video game player, but not really. He goes, look, we work for Electronic Arts. We're really known for sports games. The Madden football, of course, is the franchise of all franchises. Madden and FIFA, they had the FIFA and they had NBA. And so he said, but what we really want to do is narrative-driven games. And you would be perfect for this because you're a storyteller. So it's like, okay, all right, I'll come and meet with you guys and we'll interview. And I met with all of them and they said, great, we'd love you to start. And this is like November, end of November, maybe right after Thanksgiving. They said, great, well, we have Christmas and New Year's. How about if I come up in January and start? No, you have to come right now. Oh, okay. The next week so December 7th was my first day. Went there and went through orientation and went to the studio that now I'm going to run with 300 people that had already been hired. I had 300 people under me, software engineers, producers, art directors, everything. And then, so we're talking about what kind of narrative games we're going to do. And then a week later, maybe 2 weeks later, I got called into HR and they said, well, you know what? The PS3 had just been released. I think the Xbox 360 had just been released. All of our games are not ported for the PS3. You have to redo the games for the new technology. And I'm going like, okay. And they said, well, you're gonna have to take your studio down to 100 people. I don't even know where the washrooms are, right? And it's like, and so now I'm like, okay, well, luckily I had 5 very good producers and I had development managers who were like project managers. My boss, my 2 bosses, the guy that brought me up to hire me, had now taken a job down in LA. He was going to run EA Studio in LA. And my other boss, the guy I looked for creative assistance, he says, I'm taking my sabbatical now. So he takes his sabbatical. So now I'm stuck here trying to figure out the lives and careers of 200 people who I don't even know. I don't even know their names.
Wow.
So we went through that layoff process. And during a layoff process, we did get 2 games out there. So I did produce 2 video games, NBA Home Court and FIFA Street. I think those are the 2 games. But by July, this is going through July. I've been there like 8 or 9 months and or 7 months. And they go like, well, it's obvious, they had no need for me, right? We're not going to do narrative games. And I think they had spent all their money on Spore, which was a video game that everybody was excited about, that it cost a lot of money and I don't think it went anywhere. Maybe it made some money, I don't know. So I did that. It was great. I love Vancouver. People in Canada are great, and Vancouver is a beautiful city if you get a chance to visit. It's a beautiful city. Came back and looking around for what I could do next, and Richard Vaughn, Bob Joslin, Chris Brown had started a small design company called Contour.
Yeah.
I went to work. I went to work for them, and actually more than went to work for them, I bought into the company, became a part owner, and we worked all over the world. As we used to say, anywhere there's a threat of nuclear war, that's where we're going to work. So we worked in South Korea, we worked in India, we worked in Abu Dhabi, Dubai. And we had jobs we worked in Washington D.C. We worked on the Museum of the Marine Corps, National Museum of the Marine Corps. So we worked everywhere, but 2007, 2008 was a global depression in the economy. we kind of limped through, and we made it through. But it was, hit and miss, and it was just kind of, week to week. It was stressful because we had employees, and
Yeah.
they got paid first, and they will get paid before we got paid. And so there was weeks where we're going like, well, hopefully next week the people from Korea will send us the money they owe us. And Ryan, you know what this is like, and like it's tough when you have clients that promise you to pay, and then you're always knocking on their door.
Yeah.
And anyway, so we took a pretty big job in India. So I moved to Mumbai, probably 2010, 2011, and worked in Mumbai. So some of those, if you saw some of the pre-show, some of the videos before, that me standing out in the middle of the field, that's India.
Was that
And
for-
so it was a theme park. Yeah, we had one big attraction. It was kind of like a backdraft kind of thing, but with Indian gods. Indian gods are awoken when you disturb the Indian gods, and it was really really a good show.
Yeah.
So I did that, and then out of the blue, I got a call from Thierry Koo, who worked for me in Paris. He was one of my production designers, and he is now leading the studio at Universal Creative here in Orlando, leading the creative studio. And he said, "Would you consider ever coming back to a big company?" Like, yeah. I mean, for the right offer, yeah. He says, "Great." And now it's like November, so IAPA time, and he says, "Great." So I interviewed with Mike Hightower and Thierry Koo at like midnight, 1 a.m. in India. We're doing like Zoom. It wasn't Zoom at the time; it was another platform. Not that it matters, but and so IAPA time, I fly back here. I meet with Hightower. I think I met with Mark Woodbury, and I met with some of the leaders at the studio, and they offered me a job. And so I started in January. So this is weird thing about interviewing in November and starting in January.
Yeah.
It's kind of a reoccurring thing. I
Right.
started in January. They hired me for Universal Moscow. So how many people have
Love
been to
that part.
Universal Moscow?
Yeah.
So there's a developer, a very rich developer, who did a lot of shopping malls. He wanted to do a Universal theme park in a shopping mall. We worked on it for like 6 months, and I took like 2 or 3 trips to Moscow, several trips to London, because that's where the architect of record was. And we're just coming along. And then it became apparent that he didn't own all the contiguous property to build this mall. And so he was having difficulties with the architect of Moscow and all the government entities. So we finally said, and by the way, to Universal's credit, said, "You know what? Stop paying us. When you get this all sorted out, then we'll come back in full speed ahead, and we'll do this." And so we stopped Moscow like in June or something of 2013, and China was happening. Beijing was happening, and now Universal 10, 15 years before had sniffed around Shanghai, and that whatever deals they were trying to do there didn't work. But now there was a new government entity who wanted to build in Beijing. Universal said, "Great, let's talk about it." And I said, "I want to do Universal Beijing." So I became executive producer, vice president, creative, Universal Beijing. And I worked with them all the way up through design was done. And so design was done, getting ready to send people to the field. And it just wasn't, Mike and I, we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. So, I left. And because of my contract, I couldn't work for like 6 months. So I went and did speaking engagements. I mean, I couldn't work for a competitor. I went and did speaking engagements. I did a big speaking engagement in China. They said, yeah, it's going to be at this hotel, and we're going to live stream it. And so there was like maybe 600 people in the room.
Wow.
And after I was done, I said, "Well, how'd the stream go?" They said, "Oh, great, 500,000 people logged on."
What?
Like,
No.
500,000 people logged on. And it was about the future of theme parks in China from my perspective. And one of the people who had heard that was a guy that was a chairman of Century Media. Century Media was an advertising company. And so they did most of the ad sales for China television. And not only that, but the president, my boss, eventually my boss, he also brought in Broadway shows to tour in China, and he had produced a couple of films, and he had produced an opera. He was kind of a Renaissance guy.
Yeah.
Now, my boss did advertising. There was this company called Evergrande, and if you read any financial news or know anything about the history of Chinese bankruptcies,
I think it's still funny, right, Ryan?
No,
oh my God, Ryan knows this for sure.
Yeah, we came out to visit Paul in Beijing, and I remember Paul had an office with five theme parks on the wall. Each park was massive with 36 e-ticket attractions, and none of them could be the same at any of the parks. So you're designing like 150 something completely different e-tickets. I don't remember, Paul, if they were all going to open the same time, but I'm like, Paul, in the history of humankind, no one's opened 5 theme parks at the same time. And he's like, we're going to. So what
Yeah,
happened?
so the chairman of Evergrande clearly was very frustrated with his team. His team couldn't make decisions. They didn't know how to make decisions. They didn't know how to do anything. He became very frustrated. So the chairman of Evergrande talked to my boss and said, can you come in and figure this out and solve this? And now, to my boss's credit, he had never done theme park, but he did listen to my lecture, my speech.
Right.
So he reached out to me and said, would you consider moving to China? And we would love to hire you. And I said, well, oddly enough, I was going to move to China. So yeah, of course I would love to move to China, but I can't start until like January. That was when my contract was up. And so he said, no problem. So they flew out here. He and a bunch of people flew out here for IAPA, this reoccurring thing. Flew out here for IAPA, and I took them around IAPA, and I told them what they were looking at and who to avoid and who they should talk to, and like we would do with anybody. And it's great. So we made arrangements that I would start in January in China. And at the time, they were doing 16 theme parks at the same time.
Oh, 16.
16 theme parks at the same time.
Wow.
And I said, why don't we do one? Let's just do one.
Right.
And then let's fix the mistakes.
Yeah.
No, the chairman wants all 16. And I was like, well, that's dumb. And he said, but yeah, you can't tell the chairman that. I said, I can. You can't, I can.
Right.
I never got the chance to tell him he was dumb, but I did tell him this doesn't really make sense. Not only that, I said, okay, so where's the back of house? And they all looked at each other and was like, well, I guess we don't have one. I said, you need at least 35-40% of the area needs to be back of house. Well, the chairman said we'll do it somewhere else. It's like, no, it has to. And then the circulation path was like 3 miles to circulate the entire park. And we're going like, well, who's going to do that? Who's going to do that in a wheelchair? Who's going to push a stroller for 3 miles to see the whole park? And it's just like every decision you could make wrong, 100% they were on it. Wrong. And eventually it caught up with them. I would say towards the end, 50% of my job was begging Evergrande to pay the Western clients, which Ryan was one of them.
Yeah.
Not clients, but suppliers.
Yeah.
And it was just like crazy. It's just like every day I would be at the office and I'd go home and bang my head against the wall. Towards the end, it was clear Evergrande wasn't even going to pay us. And so we started talking to cultural centers and shopping malls. And because we had a great team. We had a very talented team of designers, all Chinese. I had like 2 or 3 Westerners. Steven Silvestri ran my creative studio. Who else? A couple other people were there. A couple other people that you know. Michael Roddy came in to try and help get the live entertainment group together. Steve Ryan came in to help organize the scheduling and the budgeting. And so I had really like superstar talent there, but we just couldn't hold it together. We just couldn't, we were too late trying to get new clients. And so it just didn't work.
Yeah.
So I was there and I came back here for Christmas. This was maybe 2001. So I was stuck in China for COVID. The airports were closed. Everything was closed. So even if I wanted to, I couldn't get out. Yeah. So once everything was open, it was Christmas time. I came back for Christmas, and literally the night before going back to the airport to go back to China, I talked to Anne, my wife, and I said, I don't feel so good. And went to emergency care, and they said, hey, congratulations, you got COVID. So it's like, I didn't get it in China. I had to get it here, right? So I self-quarantined here for 2 weeks. And then by that time, it was an early Lunar New Year. So it was the early New Year for China. And so I said, I'm not going to go back for New Year. It's just, there's no work gets done. Nobody's in the office. I'll just stay here for an extra couple of weeks. And now it's after New Year. And I said, you know what? Let's just see if we can do this telecommuting thing, see if this works. And we did that for 4 or 5 months. And at that time, I said, you know what? When you guys get a paying job, you know where I'm at. But I just feel guilty taking money and not there. I'm not helping. So I kind of stopped working for them and essentially stopped working completely, even though I don't know what the word retirement is, because to me, retirement means, I don't know, doing what you love, but you're not getting money for it. Okay, I can do that. It's like, so I do a lot more speaking now. I'm speaking again at South by Southwest. And so anybody online that has never been to South by Southwest, but is in this industry or wants to really understand this industry, I would encourage you to try at least once to go to South by Southwest. I've spoken at IAPA a couple of times. I've done a number of SAIT conferences all over the world. I've done it in Asia and Europe and certainly here in the States. And so I do that more and more now. I did a TEDx talk last year in Ireland on being an introvert in an extroverted industry, which can be difficult, because a lot of times we all assume that the loudest person in the room is the smartest. And of course, that's rarely true. So I'm doing that. I'm also working on my book, and because I do a lot of TikToks, because the more TikToks I do, the more I get to be known, and I really want to do another TEDx talk, and so that's kind of the path there. So I do a lot more, even though I've been a little bit lazy started this year, but I've got a bunch written. I just got to get out and do them. And so doing my TikToks and trying to speak more, but at the same time, I'm keeping my name out there in case a really cool project comes along where they could use my help. I would be happy to do it. Or even if there's a company that says, you know what, we need to reimagine how we do business. How do we unlock or how do we unblock the creative flow of information in this company? And so I'll do that as well. And so that's where I'm at. Whew. Oh my God.
Okay, so Paul,
we didn't even need us.
Yeah, no, well, we turned the time machine in idle.
Neutral.
Neutral. But Paul, so here we are at the end of an amazing career.
Wow.
But not really the end, because it sounds like you're certainly got way too much energy and ideas and experience, to keep fueling you for a long time to come. But at the end of these episodes, we always ask the eternal question.
Eternal burning question. What makes a guest experience timely yet timeless?
So this is a great question, and I've seen your other podcast where I expected this question to come, but I have answered this question before. So can I tell you a story?
Please.
I was doing a speaking engagement in Europe, and I think it may have been Germany or maybe in the UK. It doesn't matter. I had a flight back to the States in an overnight flight back, and my plane changed in Manchester, England.
Mm.
And so it's like 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, and the plane's not boarding yet. But in the waiting area are all these families with all these kids running around, yelling about, oh, we're gonna go see Mickey Mouse, we're gonna go see Mickey Mouse, oh, we're gonna see Donald Duck, we're gonna go see whatever. And it occurred to me at that moment, these young parents with these children are going to probably make, and I might get emotional again, are going to make the same pilgrimage they made with their parents.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that they made with their parents. And it occurred to me, yes, our job is to build attractions and to build lands and build shows, but that's not really what we do. What we do is we create spaces, we create places for people to create memories.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do.
Exactly.
Families creating memories is at the core of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, and I thought about the first time I ever went to the Magic Kingdom, which was in 1972. I don't remember what attractions I went on. I don't remember what shows I saw. I remember being on Main Street and there was a barbershop quartet and there was a live marching band and there was a guy on the corner playing the piano and there was these people coming out of the magic shop with all these invisible dogs. That's what I remember. It was the placemaking. It was the places that made you feel good. And I remembered who I was with.
Exactly.
I probably rode Haunted Mansion. I probably rode Pirates of the Caribbean, but it's not what my memory is. My memory is being in this place. So getting back to the question you started to propose earlier about Cars Land is all those people that had their first date proposed to watch their grandfather sit on the benches over in that area, who's it's now gone. It's gone. Why? Why did it didn't have to be done?
Right.
And so it just kind of makes me angry that, and I'm not going to blame the Imagineers because, again, sometimes you get an assignment, but to take away the placemaking of a place is criminal to me. It's just, they should be doing everything in their power to preserve all of this stuff. Yes, of course, the park has to evolve and it has to expand, but maybe do it more surgically as opposed to cutting off a limb and make it easy on yourself. It's just I don't like that approach. I think it's just wrong. And I think if you ask most people what they like about the parks, they will tell you it's being in the park.
Yeah.
They may not say it's, oh, I love the pirate ride or I love Haunted Mansion or I like the Hall of Presidents or whatever. It's I like the feeling I get when I'm in that park.
Yeah.
And so if you start to dilute that, you start to get rid of that for an attraction. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. It's just, I don't know.
No, you
So
do know, and you just said it. You do know, and I think, of course, I not want to speak for Ryan, but I certainly feel the same way.
Yeah.
And I've heard Tony Baxter's much more eloquent about it than I am. And so, the people that I look up to and what they think, and like Tony Baxter and Joe Rohde and those people that I like, oh yeah, I would like to I would like to be creative like them, or I would like to be more bold in my statements like them. I look to them and I think we're all saying the same thing. So
yeah, absolutely.
Anyway,
yes, we nailed it. I mean, that's a really unique take on it, and we haven't heard anything like that really, but you're totally right. That's what makes it timely and timeless, is creating memories. And one of the best days of my life was, I thought I was going to a doctor appointment and my parents surprised me with a Disneyland ticket book. And all I
wow.
remember, just like you, was, oh my God, I'm not going to the doctor. I'm going to Disneyland just with my mom and dad. My little brothers are staying home. Like, I don't remember what we rode that day, but I got to spend a whole day just alone with my parents at my favorite place on earth. So,
Well, I'm looking now at some of the people online, and I know Joe and Ryan, this, and I see Tom Morris and I see Eric Hunt, and I can't go through the whole thing, but I think there's something that we all do that we may not talk about is when we build an attraction, we open an attraction, we stand at the exit. We stand at the exit and we listen to the guests, and we listen and we say, yeah, they got it. Or and they're laughing, or they're singing the song, or they're whatever it is. And you go like, yes, we've planted another memory.
yeah,
It wasn't like, oh, we thrilled them and all that. It was like, we planted another memory.
yeah.
So
Made them feel
anyway,
something,
yeah,
Well,
made them
Paul,
feel something.
Yeah.
you certainly created memories for us.
Yeah,
today.
all over the world too.
Wow, and
millions.
Thank you.
amazing career. We wish you all the best with the future. I heard you mention something about a book. We'll look forward to that. Let us know. And
Yeah. That sounds great.
Okay.
Everybody's doing one.
Everybody's doing one. Well, why don't we go get Paul's book?
Okay. We'll tell you if we like it or not, Paul.
All right.
Okay, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Stick around. We will be right back. Becky, take it away.
That sounds good, guys. Yeah, so please stick around for that Q&A in just 60 seconds on behalf of Zeitgeist Design and Production, and actually now Zeitgeist Experiences. We hope you enjoyed the flight. And thank you so much to our friend Paul Osterhout for time traveling with us today. If you have questions for Paul, we'll talk about them right after. On behalf of us, we thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. If you enjoyed the journey, please check out all 49 of our time travel adventures on our YouTube channel or under the Zoomcast section at zeitgeist-usa.com. They're also available as podcasts wherever you listen. Tell your friends. And today marks an historic flight because it's the very last one that our own Joe Cicero is going to be co-hosting. Next month, for our 50th flight, Joe will be in the passenger seat as Ryan and a special co-host escort Joe through time to relive his own illustrious career as a Disney animator and legendary Disney Imagineer. So clear your calendars now for that one. We'll announce the date very soon. Until then, stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Get it?